Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Well, that Brahman is infinite. This phenomenal world is also infinite. But this is only a projection of that. Nevertheless, if this is taken away, that remains infinite as before. Om, peace to the individuals, peace to the planets, and peace to the animals. So we'll study Isha Upanishad and we'll read the verses we've covered already. So in this changing world, everything is subject to change. Yet everything is covered by the Lord. Practice renunciation and be strong in the consciousness of the self. Do not run after anyone's wealth. A man may wish to live for 100 years, performing his duties as prescribed by the scriptures. O man, if you do your duties in this way, then the results of whatever you do will not cling to you. There is no other way. There are worlds known to be sunless and fit for demons. They are enveloped in darkness, such as what the blind, in other words, those devoid of self-knowledge, experience. Those people who have neglected the attainment of self-knowledge and have thus committed suicide, as it were, are doomed to enter those worlds after death. Brahman is one without a second. It never moves, yet it goes faster than the mind. It is always ahead. The sense organs can never catch up with it. It is still, yet it defeats all in a race. By its power, the Lord who dwells in space upholds water and everything else in the phenomenal world. That Brahman moves and it does not move. It is far off and it is also nearby. That Brahman is inside of this and is also outside. He who sees himself, everything in himself, and everything, never hates anything. When a person knows that he himself has become everything, and he knows the oneness of things, how can he hate or love anything? He, the self, is all-pervasive, radiant, without a form, without any defect, immaculate, untainted, all-knowing, the master of his own mind, the best of all, of independent origin and eternal. He dispenses to each his due. So this is the verses we covered, and we are, as we mentioned, this is kind of the main theme of the Isha Upanishad, is this idea that there's only one consciousness, one reality there, and it's also manifested as the universe. So every single individual, every animal, every insect, everything is ultimately has its existence, and its consciousness is coming out of the one self. And so that means that within each individual, deep within, in our own inner consciousness, is the presence of that one divine infinite self. And this is the goal in Vedanta, is to become aware of the fact that your real nature, your true nature is that self. That's what you are. And when you attain that, then you attain everything, because then you become one with everything in existence, and you know the truth about who you are. Now next we come to the next few verses here, verse 9, which are a little murky, a little confusing, hard to understand, but the commentary, I think, will kind of clear things up. Anham tamham pavishanti ye avidya upasate tato bhuya ivati tamo yahu vidyayam vataha. So those who mechanically perform sacrifices, avidya, go into a darkness that is like being blind. But those who merely worship gods and goddesses, vidya, go into a deeper darkness. It says that blinded darkness here implies ignorance. And those who worship gods and goddesses go into a deeper darkness because they seek rewards for their worship. As long as there is a sense of I and mine within us, there can be no self-knowledge. When you say me and mine, you automatically identify yourself with your body-mind complex. This shows that you're ignorant of your real self, which is pure consciousness, and which is also the self of all. The sign of an ignorant person is in the way he uses the words I and mine. He says, I am so-and-so, I own this much property, and so on. So an ignorant person has many desires in his mind, and because of these desires, he's born again and again. He has to have a body, otherwise he cannot satisfy his desires. But the more he tries to satisfy them, the more they grip his mind. This goes on endlessly. But it is given to a human being to think, reason, and discriminate. Thus he soon comes to realize that the path he has been following cannot give him peace of mind. He understands that he has to choose another path, the path of renunciation. As long as he does not practice renunciation, he gropes in the dark like a blind man, and he suffers. So there are two types of people who grope in the dark. One type worships avidya, ignorance. That is, they mechanically perform the prescribed sacrifices without any thought as to what they were doing, why they were doing them, and no wonder they grope in the dark. They are doomed unless someday the truth dawns on them that to save themselves they must seek self-knowledge. Worse, however, is the situation of the other types, those who worship vidya. The word vidya usually means knowledge, but here it is used to mean gods and goddesses. Some people worship gods and goddesses so that they may someday attain the same status. They may get their desire fulfilled, but this will only delay their liberation. That is why the Upanishad says that they will go into deeper darkness. So as we mentioned before, in these ancient times, the ancient worships they did, the yajnas, were usually performed with some specific purpose in mind. It could be to attain prosperity in the world, to attain health, more cattle, more children, and so forth. Or it can also be, they could be performed in order to gain heaven, to attain high places up in the kind of celestial realms. Now, on the one hand, you had the person who just performed the worships without any particular understanding or of what he was doing, of purpose behind it. So this goes into the realm of avidya, ignorance. In other words, he creates karma. By doing the worships and things, he'll create a certain karma, and that'll produce a certain results, and eventually he'll get the benefits of those results. On the other hand, those who worship with knowledge, seeking higher kind of state of existence, they also will eventually get results, and they may even in time become a god or a goddess or something in the universe. But from the standpoint of self-knowledge, of the ultimate goal, of what you're ultimately trying to achieve, which is to attain oneness with the one infinite consciousness, then both of these are obstacles. And they say that vidya is actually a bigger obstacle because the soul gets caught there for a longer time. Usually the person who's just doing some rituals and things, or leading an ordinary life, he goes to celestial realm for some time, and then fairly quickly comes back to earth. Whereas the gods and goddesses, they may stay in their heaven for millennium, for a long, long time, before they have to be reborn, but they're not progressing. They're not moving towards that ultimate goal of self-knowledge. And when you look, kind of the mythology, the old stories and all, you'll see that beyond the gods and goddesses, Indra and Vayu and all these, there were the sages, the rishis. And the rishis were actually more powerful than all the gods and goddesses together, because they were connected with Brahman, with the ultimate reality. And so, like that, this is the ultimate goal that we're all kind of moving towards. Now, the main obstacle, the thing that keeps us from knowing that we're one with God, that we have God in all His infinite glory, power, wisdom within us, the thing that keeps us from being aware of that is this sense of I am mine, the ego. The sense that I am this particular individual. Now, what that means practically is that our consciousness is saying, I am this body, I am this mind. And then our experience is limited to what that body, what that mind experiences. And because of that, we're not aware of who we really are. That we're always with God, that God's always with us, that we're always kind of one with God. We're not aware of that. And so we get totally caught up in the various things we experience. And in this world, what we experience is the pairs of opposites. So we have good days and bad days. We enjoy some things, other times we go through painful experiences like that. We're going to get one experience after another, but all the experiences are very limited. And they come and go. We may be in a very happy situation, period of our life, but then suddenly it changes, and now we're in a very unhappy period, and it's always like that, like going up and down, because that's the nature of the world. And so, even if a person becomes a god or a goddess, say, or even some very high level, he's still got this sense of I, that this is me, and his consciousness has expanded, has grown into something much beyond human consciousness, but still that sense of I, this is me. Now, the way to self-knowledge is ultimately when you forget the self. When he talks about renunciation, and when they talk about renunciation, he's not talking about a negative thing, so much of rejecting everybody or trying to hate everybody or things like that. Is actually, what he's talking about is the shift in consciousness. The only thing you have to get beyond, the only thing ultimately you have to renounce is your ego. The little part of you that's cut yourself off from the whole. And then says, oh, this little parcel is me, and all my concerns are focused on this me. That ego, that sense of I and mine, is what prevents us from being aware of who we are already. And so, as long as there's desires by it, because when there's ego, there's desire. We have a body, we have a mind, and that mind, it seeks fulfillment. It seeks more money, more pleasure, more happiness. And here and there, like I say, everybody in the world is searching for happiness, and usually we're seeking it from outside, trying to grab hold of something, whether it's a relationship or money or a job or fame, and all these things we try to grab hold of, and thinking if when I get this, I'm going to be happy. All this is based on trying to fulfill the ego, which feels a lack. We have a sense that things are not as good as they could be. We may be reasonably happy with life, but if we look deep, there's a sense that things are just not as good as I feel they should be, and so we're constantly trying to fill that hole within ourselves. And people seek different people. Some people use drugs, some people do this, some people do that, all kinds of ways that people try to fulfill that sense of there's something missing that I've got to find in order to be satisfied. And as we mentioned before, though, the secret and the spiritual teaching is that happiness is something you are. It's something you are by your very nature, bliss, because you're one with Brahman. You're one with the infinite bliss. That's your natural state. And so, only as you begin to become aware of that natural state, of who you really are, of what you are, will you begin to find real happiness. And this, like I said, we've mentioned before, a person thinks, oh, if I can get $1 million, I'm going to be happy. He gets his $1 million. And now he finds out he's just as miserable as he was before. It didn't really make much difference. Other people think fame. So many people, we sit there, we watch movie stars and say, oh, if I can be famous. But the people like the Beatles, most famous too, they said after the first year, so it just drove them crazy. Because everywhere they went, it was a circus. They couldn't live, and you have paparazzi following you around, everything. You can't live a kind of a normal life. And so, like that, everything we look at the world, we say, oh, that looks good. But then when we get it, we often find that it not only doesn't bring us happiness, but it may ultimately bring us a lot of misery. But when you begin to become aware of happiness within yourself, in your own inner nature, and your own kind of natural state, then, as you mentioned, you find that not only do you become happy, but all your experiences become happy. If you have $1 million, you're happy. If you don't have $1 million, you're just as happy. Because you're not depending on anything else or anyone else to provide that happiness to you. And so, this is the message that all, as individuals, as I am mine, we're always looking someplace that's going to bring me what I want, what I desire. It can be the physical things, like more cattle, long life, health, things like that. It can also be celestial things, like going to heaven, and different things can be there. But all these things, as long as they're generated by the desire, by my desire, I want to have this, then you can eventually get them, but you won't reach the ultimate goal of what you're seeking is with your awareness of your oneness with Brahman, of your oneness of God, who's behind this whole universe. And the reason for that is as long as you're identified with I and mine, with the individual, as long as you're identified with the desires and so forth, your consciousness is saying, I am this body, I'm this mind, this is what I am. And in the process, your consciousness is not aware of what it really is. That is something completely separate from all these things. And this is also what makes the spiritual path, the higher kind of spiritual path, so difficult. Everybody can appreciate the idea of going to heaven. Yes, I'm going to heaven. I have a heavenly mansion. I'm happy. I have everything. There's no problems. Good food. Everything is there. So everybody can appreciate that. And then if I perform these rituals, if I do things, then I'm going to get to heaven and I'll be happy there. And so, but to say you have to give up being you. You have to give up being your small I, your limited I, your selfish I, to say that has to go. Only then we become aware of the divine being. Most people really don't want that, and that's the problem. That's the obstacle. Is being good, doing rituals, doing things like that will bring good results, good karma, and you will begin to have a much happier life, and you eventually will go to higher realms, happier realms afterwards. But kind of the mystical path, the spiritual path, of trying to actually know God, what He truly is, and of knowing who you are, what you truly are, that involves a transformation of what you think you are, and it's a very difficult thing for most people. Swami Varadananda, he used to say that if you had a fork in the road, and you had one side saying to God, and one saying to a lecture about God. He said most people will go to the lecture, because the lecture won't bother them. They can sit there, they listen to it, and then they go back home, be themselves. But if you actually want to go to God, there is ultimately that whole smaller self has to go. And this is what the difficulty is. That sense of I'm here and I'm going to enjoy heaven, that you have to get beyond so that the real, true consciousness can manifest itself. It's like right now, each of us are an individual, little body, little body. Behind each individual, there's one vast consciousness. And in terms of creation, it's Hiranyagarbha, the cosmic mind. Yeah. Hiranyagarbha is there, the cosmic mind is there, behind each and every individual. Now, as long as I'm focused on being my particular individual, then I'm kind of at that state. But as a person begins to go deep, as he begins to renounce or kind of let go of that sense that I'm this particular individual, gradually he becomes aware that, oh, I'm actually this consciousness which is there within all the individuals. And this is what you found in the Isha Upanishad, is the idea that you become everything. So back in verses 6 and 7, it said, he who sees everything in himself and himself in everything, he never hates anything. When a person knows that he himself has become everything, and he knows the oneness of things, how can he hate or love anything? So this is the idea, and this is what is ultimately meant by renunciation, is identifying with that consciousness which has become everything, rather than the small consciousness, which is trying to enjoy a little of this or a little of that. So this is the ultimate goal, but most people, like I say, most people are not particularly ready for it. And they're saying they don't really want it yet. They want improvements. They want some more peace, some more happiness, and so forth in their life. So the next verse will come. Anya deva urividyaya. Anya da urividyaya. Iti shushuma dirana ye nasta dvichachakshara. So scholars say that the path of avidya, performing Agnihoti and other sacrifices, and the path of vidya, worshiping gods and goddesses, produce different results. So wise men confirm this. So vidya and avidya are both hindrances to self-knowledge. But vidya is even worse than avidya. The word vidya is used here in a special sense. Here it means worshiping gods and goddesses. By worshiping gods and goddesses, you will go after death to the world of gods and goddesses. But will that help you? The time you spend there is wasted, because if you were not there, you could have spent that time moving forward towards self-knowledge, which is your goal. So in the world of gods and goddesses, you cannot do that. And thus you go deeper and deeper into darkness. Avidya is karma, and therefore a hindrance. You perform avidya, in other words, you perform Agnihotra and other sacrifices. This is a roundabout way of purifying the mind. And it is also groping in the dark. But it may not have as heavy a toll on your time and energy as the other. And the final advice of Shankara is to combine both work and worship. Together, they may quicken your pace towards self-knowledge, because it will lead to Chitta Shuddhi, the purification of the mind. When this happens, your desire for enjoyments will become less and less, your sense of I and mine will subside. This is the way to Brahma Bhukti, gradual or progressive liberation, according to Shankara. And then the next verse is going to explain things a little more. So vidyam, shavidyam cha, yasta dve do bhayam saha, avidyayam mrityam tirtva, vidyayam rita mahashnute. So he who worships gods and goddesses, vidya, and also performs sacrifices, avidya, attains immortality by sacrifices, avidya, and attains bliss by worshipping gods and goddesses, vidya. So the condition in both cases, worshipping gods and goddesses and performing sacrifices, is that the person should have no motive for personal gain. He should not desire the fruits of his actions, such as going to heaven of gods and goddesses. As earlier explained, the word vidya has a special meaning here. It means worship of gods and goddesses. Similarly, avidya also has a special meaning. It is karma, that is performing agni-hotra and other sacrifices. Such karmas are obligatory, but if they are done without any attachment to their fruits, they help purify the mind. So combining karma and worship is a path to gradual liberation. Shankara approves this for those who are not yet ready to renounce. But suppose you follow the two paths separately. If you perform avidya, you will go to Pitriyaloka, the world of your ancestors. This is a dark region because it is far removed from self-knowledge. In fact, you will have to wait a long time in order to attain self-knowledge. But if you worship Vidya, that is gods and goddesses, you go into still darker regions, and your attainment of self-knowledge is even further delayed. So true, you go to Devaloka, the heaven of gods and goddesses, but you're caught in the pleasures there, and you remain there until the fruits of your worship are fully exhausted. You are then reborn as a human being, and your struggle resumes from where you left off. This is why Vidya is considered worship. But if you combine the two, that is, perform the obligatory karmas without any attachment to the fruits, and at the same time worship gods and goddesses, again without any desire to go to heaven, then you can get the benefit of both, liberation and bliss. For those who are not yet ready to renounce, this path is recommended. So the basic idea, fundamental idea, is that behind karma yoga, behind the path of yoga, the union with God, the path of karma yoga, is that you do your work, you do your duty, you do the work that's given you to do, but you don't have any personal selfish desire behind it. And this is the crux of it. It's not that you stop working, not that you lay in bed all day, you don't do anything, but that you do whatever you're given to do, whatever your responsibilities, whatever your situation in life brings to you. You do each situation as it comes, but you don't do it with any desire or motive behind it. And this is sounds like you do it all kind of indifferent. Oh, I don't care, I'm just going through the motions. But it's not that at all. What it means is that you do it, but as an instrument of God, realizing that God is there, and you're just the instrument or the child or the servant of God, and you do it accordingly. Now, in order to do that, you have to give up your personal preferences. Normally our ego is saying, oh, I want this to happen, and we're spending all our time trying to make it happen. Or we're saying, I don't want this to happen, so we spend all our time trying to avoid it. But in true kind of spiritual attitude, or true karma yoga, there's no sense of personal preference. I want this to happen, I don't want this to happen, I want this to get this, I don't want to have that. Like that sense of personal control of things begins to give way, and instead comes just an acceptance of things, and gradually that sense of acceptance gradually begins to become aware that there's a deeper presence here that's operating. And gradually, as you begin to become aware of that, you begin to surrender more and more to it. And we mentioned before, this is really the essence of true spiritual life. It's not my will, but thy will be done. And this is known by all the saints and the mystics, as long as my will is there. And we mentioned, we were talking about yoga before, a person can become a great yogi. He can acquire great occult powers, all kinds of things, potentials are there for a person who practices the yoga and so forth. But as long as that desire enters into it, that this is my power, this is my ability, this is for me, then you kind of fall off the path. And we mentioned before when we talked about Raja Yoga, I think that a person comes to like a fork in the road. He's going along developing his power, and he suddenly begins to realize that before he didn't have that many desires, because basically he didn't think he could get them. You know, it just was almost. But as a person begins to develop his inner power, his inner concentration, power of mind, so he starts to go, oh, I can actually do this. And so at that point, he reaches like a fork in the road. One fork is towards self-aggrandizement. For me, this is all for me. And so I develop my call, I develop my following, I bring in money, I bring in all these things which kind of advanced yogi he can attract, and it's all done for me. And we see cults and guru cults and things like that happen. The other path, though, is it's not for me. I'm just this part of my kind of approach to God, and it's for God's sake. And then it's a whole different thing. And ultimately, a person goes beyond these kind of yogic powers or things and becomes an instrument in the hands of the omniscient divine consciousness, which is behind this whole universe and which is equally concerned with the welfare of all beings. And so this, as long as when we do things, see in these ancient times, when you talk about the worship of it, you don't find too much of an attitude of devotion or real worship there. It's more of controlling the laws of karma and things like that, so the worship would produce results. But when we think of worship, usually particularly modern times, I think more times, now there's more of the idea of bhakti, of devotion, that you do the worship as an offering of God. And in true sattvic worship, in the purest type of worship, you do it without any thought that I'm going to be benefited by this in any way. No, there's no thought, oh, I'm going to get to heaven, or if I do this, I'm going to get one thing or another. It's just you offer to God. In that act of pure offering to God, you're now ultimately offering yourself. And this is what creates the condition where that real self, it can become actually a part of your experience. And it can lead you closer and closer. And so this is the idea. And like I said, this is the basic idea in Karma Yoga, is that you remove the desire or the motive from the action, but it doesn't mean you stop performing the actions. And understand, like I said, it makes it sound like it becomes very indifferent and boring and dry, but actually what it means, when we talk about selfish desire, or desire, what it means is that one person, we use this example for one person, he creates a painting. He starts, he does a painting, all the time he's thinking, how much money can I get for this painting? Will this painting make me famous? And this and that, will I become like Andy Warhol? And like that, he's always thinking, how can I get the benefit of this painting? What am I going to get out of this? Whereas another artist, he creates a painting just out of trying to express beauty. He's got some experience, and he's just trying to express it. He doesn't think, what's in it for me? Will they be able to sell it? How much will I get? Those thoughts aren't there. He's just trying to express a creative desire to express something beautiful. This is what our work is meant to be. It's an attempt to express the divine beauty, the divine wonder, and love of the universe, and just express. But as soon as the ego grabs hold of that process and says, no, I'm going to use this to make my fortune, then you distorted the whole thing, and then the creative power begins to dry out. You begin to lose. We remember 2 weeks ago, I think we read the article on the Tree of Life, that the idea is that there's one consciousness there, there's one power there. one tree of life, out of which all things are come, and we're all like fruits or branches on that tree. Now, as long as we're connected to the tree, that life force, that power, that creative energy, will flow through us. And we'll be, find our own life blessed, and we automatically will be a blessing to everybody else. But as soon as ego comes in, it's like you've taken that branch now and you've cut it off from the tree. And now, and this is what an ego is. Ego means we're walking around in this world as a little branch and having no connection at all with the tree. Now, to start with, that branch may have been full of beautiful flowers, full of beautiful fruit and everything. But then, you find after it's been cut off from the tree, within a few days, everything starts to wither and dry up. The flowers start to shrivel, the fruit starts to go bad, everything starts to kind of die away. And this is what happens when we live our ego life. We come into life full of energy, full of possibilities, full of all kinds of things, wonderful things we could do. And as we get older, we find slowly those energies, that power, we're slowly starting to dwindle until we end up in an old folks' home, and then we're not hardly functional at all. And like that, this is the ego life cut off from the tree. But when we're connected with our source, which is not just our source, but everybody's source, then we find there's a power in our life that sustains us, that keeps us going, that keeps the mind going, that keeps the creative kind of energy going. And then we realize that what makes us good, what makes us a good person, what gives us talent, what gives us ability, is not us, but it's the tree, it's the source. And so this is the difference between the spiritual life and the ordinary life. The ordinary person only has his own ability, his own education, his own kind of goodness to work with, and it's very limited. And it can be a very good person, but he can be equally a very bad person. But it's all very limited to what his own personal capacity is. But when you're connected to the source of the whole universe, then there's literally no limit to what can be done. But what will be done has to be according to the will of God, not your personal will. And this is where the problem comes, or where the main obstacle comes. Is that God is always trying to flow through us, always trying to function through us, and we're always getting into the way. And we're saying, no, I'm going to do it this way. And it's like, we're all like children in that sense. The mother's trying to vacuum the carpet, the little 2-year-old says, oh, let me vacuum. But the mother knows, child can't do it good, but she says, okay, yeah, go ahead. So like that, as long as we take charge, God says, okay, go ahead. And we usually end up making a pretty big mess out of our life, or at least unsatisfactory life. But when we're connected with that omniscient, omnipotent, all-powerful, all-loving, all-wise, divine source of the whole universe, then there's literally no limit to what we can do. But it will be on God's terms, not on our terms. And this is where our main problem comes, is that sense of I and mine, that sense of I'm always focused, looking at things in terms of my success and happiness and so forth, my getting to heaven, my salvation. As long as and this goes on for a long time kind of in the spiritual practice, that as long as we're seeking my salvation, my happiness, we will make progress. We will get some benefit from it, but ultimately we won't realize the truth until you let go of all that and just say, God, please just reveal yourself, be what you are, do whatever you want, I'm just your servant. Then there's a possibility that we will achieve that shift in consciousness from being this individual, this branch cut off from the tree, totally living my own existence, but to being back reconnected with the tree, and then finding the whole universe begins to unfold from within. And so we find that makes it. Heaven seems like a very good thing. You know, meeting with the gods and goddesses, that seems like a very good thing. But when you attain oneness with that on which all the heavens, all the gods, all the universe, and everything else in the Lord besides has come, when you're one with that, then it's beyond anything you get in a personal sense. So you have it, whether the jiva, individual soul, is going around, going through all kinds of different experiences. Sometimes it has happy lives, sometimes it has unhappy lives, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, like that, going through all kinds of samsara, different types of experiences. And always trying to seek something higher, gradually seeking a kind of higher level of consciousness. And it goes sometimes to heaven, sometimes to hell, here and there, you know. But beyond that individual consciousness, seeking all kinds of experiences, beyond that is the one consciousness, the one ocean. And that, when a person attains that, becomes aware of that, then everything else, both this life and the next, and everything else is taken care of, and much more besides. And this is the goal. Most people, they're not really seeking that. They're seeking a little better life, a little better conditions, a little happier state of being, but they're not really seeking that because it involves letting go of this personal self and opening yourself up to the universal, the one consciousness. Yeah. So that's what this verse is about. Through worship, through worshiping gods and so forth, you can attain higher realms, you can attain higher experiences, but you don't get the self-knowledge, the knowledge of Brahman that is the ultimate goal. But the idea is that behind worship, as long as there's a motive, behind all our actions, as long as there's a motive, a personal desire, that I'm doing this because I'm hoping to get some emotional satisfaction, some financial satisfaction, whatever, but as long as that's the driving force, then it's not truly spiritual. It'll produce results, creates karma, and if you're doing good things, it'll bring good results back, but it doesn't lead to self-knowledge so much. But when we do things not seeking for our own personal desires, like the painter, not seeking who's going to buy the painting, what I'm going to get out of it, but just expressing the creativity, the love, the divine presence within. This is what we're actually here for, is we're all manifestations, expressions of God, to which God is trying to play a role in this world. And so we don't our actions should come out of that inner urge. And this actually can happen, that as we change the direction that we're going in, as we begin to divert our attention away from our personal life, our personal existence and ups and downs and so forth, our problems and things like that, as we begin to seek deeper, gradually there's an attunement, a connection will be made. And then once that connection is made, then you see that God's grace begins to flow. You know, Sri Krishna used to say that God's grace, the breeze of God's grace is always blowing, but we have to unfurl our sails. And this is the purpose behind all your sadhanas, all your spiritual practice, is to unfurl your sail, to make that connection so that we can begin to experience that flow of God's grace. And then once you attain that, more and more you realize that I don't have to do anything. More and more you realize that God is running the universe. God is handling things. Suddenly you've got this whole vast universe there, and then we're telling God, oh, I got to do this, or you've got to do this, or please come and settle this, like He doesn't know what's going on. And then you realize that really we can kind of trust God. But in order to truly trust God, you have to somehow get a sense of a connection there. And then that connection then sets the whole process in motion, and this gradually evolves eventually into self-realization. As the more a person goes deeper and deeper, the more and more the little ego, the little mind and things are kind of out of the way, then more and more of that divine consciousness is present there. Okay, so we will stop there, and before we go on to the next one. So this is the idea, is that worship is not bad, knowledge is not bad. And also, they use the term vidya, which is, as he said, there's usually a specific term here. This, according to Shankar, is that it means worship of gods and goddesses. But vidya, its basic meaning is knowledge. And also, knowledge itself is an obstacle to the higher realization. In the sense that knowledge is book learning. It's things you get out of books, things you get out of talks, concepts, ideas in your mind, thoughts about God, but it's not the same as God. And this is why a person can become a great scholar, a great Sanskrit scholar, a great scripture scholar, and so forth. Know everything in scripture, and still not be particularly spiritual. It's in University of Chicago. It has a very high level kind of Sanskrit department and things, but the approach is always seems to be very secular. That it's like, oh yeah, it's like the religion. I think Wendy Doniger is there, but anyway, she wrote a book like Sex and Violence in the Upanishads or something. It's like they have all the scholarship, but there's no interest in the religion. I think that the person who said, who did the talk with Swami Vivekananda chair, he said, "Oh, I'm not really religious." So like that, it's a person can be a great scholar, pundit, everything else, and not be at all spiritual. Whereas another person can know practically nothing and be wonderfully spiritual. So in other words, it's not having book knowledge, it's not having a lot of concepts or ideas about God. It's making the context so that God begins to reveal Himself directly to you. And this is what, in the spiritual people, the mystics and all, this is what they reach, is that point where they're getting their knowledge, not from the theology or books, but directly from God. And that's possible for any human being to make that connection and to have God actually begin to function in their life. And it can function in terms of guidance. What should I do now? It can function in the terms of protection and a blessing and an upliftment gradually. Drawing us to see, when we're seeking, okay, I'm doing all these worships, I'm doing all these practices and yogas and things, when we're doing all this, that I'm in charge and I'm doing it so I can get this result here, then God's not really functioning. But when God begins to come into your life, the consciousness of God, then it begins to bring whatever you need. It begins to draw you up to God, and everything else will just fall into place. And so this is, it's like I said, it's, as long as there's motives behind our actions, as long as our ego is in charge of everything, saying, I'm going to make the world behave where I want it to behave, then you're not making much progress. Even though you may get to heaven, or you may acquire all kinds of benefits out of your karma, your good karma, but still you're not making a lot of spiritual progress. But when you do things without a selfish motive, not driven by the egos so much and your personal desires, but hoping, trying to serve God, then it begins a genuine kind of spiritual progress. Sri Ramakrishna said that it's very hard to get rid of the ego. He said it's like you got scum or algae on the pond, and you can clear it away, but then right away it comes back, and we're struggling with our algae out there right now. So he said, so your ego, you may disappear for a moment in deep meditation, but right away it comes right back. But he said, so rather then you should cultivate the ripe ego. The normal ego says, I'm so-and-so. I got this much education, I got this job, I own this home, this is my family, and all these things are very important in society. All these kind of ideas, this is the unripe ego. He said the ripe ego thinks, I'm the child of God, I'm God's servant, I'm the instrument of God. That gradually prepares the way for the actual experience of God. That God comes himself and begins to kind of lift you up and take care of you if once you begin to open yourself to let him come in. So this is the next week. We'll kind of continue with talking about the causal level. But we will get to that next week. So now, as you mostly know, Swami Isha Upanishad is in India, Belgaum right now. He'll be getting back on Wednesday, I think the 18th. And we have, so that means I'll be doing this Sunday's talk, I'll be doing on our journey to God. Then on next week, then we have Swami Varadananda is going to be here from the 21st, I think, to the 23rd. And he's going, or 22nd, I think. Anyway, he's going to do a program. He's got 4 programs scheduled. One at the Park Forest Hindu Temple, one at Lake Forest Hindu Temple way up north, and one at Hindu Temple over here, and also then a Sunday talk here. He's going to have 2 short visits here, from the 21st to the 23rd, and then again from the 27th to the 29th. So on the 29th, he's going to speak here on deliberation on the Ramachari Manas, and somewhere he's going to be doing like all-day retreats or programs on the Ramachari Manas. So that will be coming out. Oh, and this Saturday, tomorrow, we have Ramnam. We have the RT from 7 to 7:30. There'll be Ramnam at 7:30. And as I mentioned, Swami Isha Upanishad, he gets back on the 18th. Then later on the 25th, he takes off again, goes to Seattle, San Francisco, and Portland, from the 25th to July 5th. And then on the last weekend in June, when Swami Vivekananda will do the talk here, that same weekend we have our retreat with the Swami Yogatmananda up at Ganges on the Nasadiya Sutta. So all that's coming up. So any questions on anything we covered? Om Asato Ma Satyaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amritam Galaya Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light, and lead us from death to immortality. Om peace,